Welcome back to the Mythic Dungeon International as we get ready for our 4th series of the day between Black Mamba and Full Speed. And this is going to be a fun matchup as well. In particular, and this one's ironic because our first map is going to be on King's Rest, which has never failed to be a good show.
Oh man, King's Rest plus East Cup is always a recipe for excitement for sure. Fortunately, this time around they have some pretty easy affixes.
I think it's about as easy as it gets.
Yeah, it's pretty much as easy as it gets. Volcanic, Skittish, Fortified, so bosses aren't difficult. No real bad trash affixes. They're all melee characters, so they don't have to worry about Volcanic. Only the healer really has to worry about it. And,
but it's King's Rest.
It's King's Rest! Yes! Well, I'm very excited onto that one. And Game 2 with Toldgor, which we have also not seen just yet. And that third map, if we go to it, will be on the Undera, which Black Mamba had the #1 time by a pretty significant margin over their opponents onto that one. It was actually first rank versus 8th rank if it goes into an Undera, so massive favoritism onto Black Mamba if it goes into a 3-game series. But looking at King's Rest as we're getting ourselves started onto this one, Nagura, we've seen how aggressive that first room can be, and always looking at how the different emissaries start changing around any of those different effects. So, for example, we're going to have the Tides Emissary on the very first room, and that's going to be the entire focus of that dungeon is Tides Emissaries everywhere. Casts getting off left and right, so much focus on line of sight.
Yeah, we've seen the Western team struggle with this dungeon so much last weekend as well, as we had the cast go through, we had full team-wise coming in, and wow, this is really one-sided for Black Mamba here.
Is that the highest we've ever seen?
Probably.
95% for Black Mamba, as Twitch chat certainly has all of the favor and all the love for them as we're getting ourselves ready to dive down into the King's Rest.
I was the hashtag FS smiley face. King's Rest.
You're 5%.
Yeah, I'm a big boy, what can I say? But, you know, this dungeon, we've talked about it time and time again. We just talked about it now. The real danger of the dungeon, I mean, it could be made much worse by affixes, but there's just so much dangerous trash. I mean, we're going to see things unravel in the very first part of this dungeon. I mean, maybe even very early on here, as Black Mamba has already been quite aggressive here and grabbed the Void-Touched Emissary as well. Now, important to note for these Guardians, they've changed from the previous season, and their frontal, their suppression frontal only targets the tank now. So big undertaking here for Wong, who's already taken 2 stacks from that Void Emissary. If he takes a 30, he will die, but he actually gets clipped by the suppression frontal and goes down. So now we have 4 very angry Guardians running around, plus a very, very angry Void-Touched Emissary. Finally, they do manage to down her as he comes in and has a double taunt that he can use for 2 of these 4 mobs. Full speed, going full speed ahead right now, straight into the Golden Serpent's room, pulling together double pack here of casters as well. And this room can get pretty... This is what I was saying to Nagura. This first room is where it gets out of hand already. But, I mean, Black Mamba is doing the pre to that room.
They already have 5 deaths coming in here as they just continue to die over and over. As one comes back in, he dies again to the suppression just because the stun goes through those kind of stairs, right? So you don't see where the animation is going to, and then you're just going to die. They probably just have to reset this point because they cannot control the aggro anymore. And as you mentioned, the suppression, the stun, this frontal is actually targeting the tank now all the time. But if the aggro is all over the place, you're gonna have the stuns go all over, and there's no way to dodge them anymore. And it's also very hard to see this animation if there's so much like stairs and elevation around. So you can just see Black Mamba struggle so much compared to Full Speed. And Black Mamba were the ones who were supposed to be the favorites in this matchup. So Full Speed definitely just, you know, doing a better job dealing with this trash, but they're also not doing this difficult pull at the start.
Yeah, I mean, the full moon eclipsing there over Moon as he gets killed yet again to make that 8 nice even deaths for Black Mamba early. They're still in the beginning room of the dungeon here. Wong doing what he can to stabilize the situation. This Full Speed having absolutely no problem right now. They've downed some of the trash, a bit less aggressive than some of the West teams that we saw, of course, but we do have different affixes, equally easy affixes. I would say both regions for this first cup had pretty simple affixes for King's Rest because we know just how nasty it can be. Full Speed here dealing with their last pack as we see Tree of Life get popped here by Just we can see that CD, of course, at the top there being already consumed as 13% trash is done here for Full Speed. They look to kill the last pack in order to spawn the Golden Serpent in just a moment. Black Mamba 14% trash, and they haven't even started on this room here, so they're very aggressive about trash early on, meaning they're probably going to use a skip of a substantial amount on the bridge after Machimba.
just the whole team getting hit by those tornadoes, as you can see, just the debuff that gets applied after getting hit by it, and just having to heal so much just because of the tornado hit. And he himself also getting hit by it, unfortunate. Just everyone having a DPS brain in full speed right now, and he's struggling, the tank dropping so low just because Jess has to heal all of these debuffs away. These huge mistakes coming in by full speed, just making the healer's life so much more difficult because of this.
Just heal forehead, side dipping low. He uses his rallying there, which actually ended up saving his life just because he dipped so low. Full speed finally 22% on the board. Golden Serpent spawning here. Sai waits patiently at the aggro location of the boss, wasting absolutely no time. Bloodlust immediately popped for the team. We are, of course, in a fortified environment here, so the boss is... you know, this dungeon has probably some of the most dangerous bosses of the 10 dungeons in Battle for Azeroth, so tossing them a bit of a bone here with the fortified setting rather than tyrannical this season. But, I mean, some of the trash here is also equally nasty, as we'll experience once we get to the bridge after Machimba. But full speed here, 70% on the board as they rapidly decrease the Golden Serpent's health here as Black Mamba tries to catch up on their side after that quite disastrous start to the dungeon.
I really wonder if it's worth it to save the Bloodlust for this boss. We also see Black Mamba holding on to their Bloodlust, even though they had this huge wipe at the very start, and it seemed like a very, very dangerous pull with the constructs that they were doing at the start. So why not use their Bloodlust for these mobs, as it is a fortified setting? The bosses got nerfed on top of not having a tyrannical either. So I just feel like it would be more efficient time-wise and, you know, damage-wise too, to use their Bloodlust on this trash, while both of the teams seem to be saving it for the boss. Now, full speed, of course, very far ahead. Well, Black Mamba is still trying to clear this room, but you have to keep in mind that Black Mamba did finally finish off those constructs, and therefore they're going to have a little bit more percentage coming into this.
Indeed, they did. Black Mamba there, Wong popping shield walls. He dipped incredibly low from the trash while Nagura was chatting about their very... not so eloquent pull at the beginning of the dungeon. Definitely a hard pull, but once you do stabilize with those 4 constructs, it's actually not so bad. I think the main criticism really of that pull was trying to DPS the Void Emissary early on instead of rounding up the constructs, but nonetheless, certainly a dangerous pull and something you might want to consider in the future to use that Bloodlust on. I totally agree with you on that. Golden Serpent has been downed here by full speed as they run. I gotta stop saying full speed ahead, but I'm gonna say it a million times in this cast. They run over to the Gauntlet area and get ready for the first of 4 kings that spawn within the area. Of course, this order is predetermined and preset for the entirety of the season, just to keep it equal for all the teams here. As we can see, King Akpul get aggroed here. Black Mamba now on the Golden Serpent as well, popping that Bloodlust and looking to desperately catch up. We're already back in this position. Not only are they behind in the dungeon, but they're going to need to overcome their opponent by at least 40 seconds because of the 8 deaths currently.
Yeah, and you can see full speed doing this more traditional strategy of pulling those constructs on top of this gauntlet here. Now, effectively, Black Mamba only got 2 extra constructs from this very pull at the beginning, because the other 2 constructs they could have dealt with while doing the gauntlet or during the boss fight here. So, not sure if this is going to pay off for Black Mamba later on. This strategy seems like it worked out for them before, else they wouldn't play it, but again, full speed just way far ahead here. Now, this is a difficult pull though, because the constructs have a lot of HP, it's fortified, and the gauntlet is buffed by fortified too. All those named mobs that are in these trash groups, they are dangerous, and they have dangerous abilities that they have to interrupt. If any of their whirlwind axes are going through, or the lightning is not going to get interrupted immediately with a typhoon or a ring of peace, then you can definitely be in trouble. Or if you get stunned by the suppression frontal, which we've seen happen before for Black Mamba.
Just a little note here about the tanks as well. Both running a bit more defensive build than we saw with the Demon Hunter earlier, but Sai actually running Vial of Animated Blood, which is a more offensive choice versus the usual Urchin / Edict combo. Edict, of course, being run by both tanks here. So full speed 37% now as they're working on their next King group. 8% on the Golden Serpent for Black Mamba, who... outside of the first pull, has gotten through the rest of this relatively unscathed. Important to note as well that Just has procced his staff, so he won't have that Ashara staff available for 10 minutes. And not just that, Nagura, but once it becomes available, I mean, all those charges are kind of done so early in the dungeon. Probably did not want to pop that so early, but that is all she wrote for the staff for 10 minutes. 36% on the board for Black Mamba as they now start in this gauntlet area, and of course, don't have any constructs to pull on top of it.
Yeah, that as well. They did finish off all 4 constructs here, so it's definitely going to be a little bit easier for Black Mamba to deal with. But Full Speed handled the constructs really well. They're on their way after this Captain Atu here. They're going to be on their 3rd trash pack, so definitely still ahead at this point. But you've also seen how low Jeswhite dropped just because of this Axe Barrage coming out of the named mob here, doing so much damage to the whole group. Of course, the Lightning AoE will be got interrupted by the Typhoon or by the Ring of Peace. You can just rotate those 2 and you will be able to interrupt them all. Now, in this next trash group here on the King and the Queen, you actually have a Mind Control come out on a random member, which cannot be removed by anyone in this group because they do not have Blood Elf racials as they're playing Alliance, and none of the classes here have an offensive dispel.
No, they don't, but they could just try to kill her, obviously, as quickly as possible, just to make sure that not too many of those Mind Controls leak through. He's into their Shadow Bolt, well interrupted there. Full Speed, 43%. Black Mamba, of course, understandably higher in trash percentage than Full Speed, so hopefully whatever strategy they planned early on with the quadruple construct pull will pay off in terms of skip later in the dungeon. But right now, I mean, they're probably just praying that Full Speed has some issues on the bridge later on, something that Black Mamba will be skipping unless they plan to go well over 100%, which I hope they don't. That would be very efficient. Final pull here coming in for Full Speed in the Gauntlet area before they move out of it and move over to Machimba's room full of those ooey gooey rich and chewies. Mamba here still working on, looks like the 2nd of 4.
Yeah, so the Queen here, which Full Speed is working on, actually does a lot of tank damage with this shoot and can't actually be stunned or interrupted in any way. So you want to make sure that you have some defensives at least coming up here as it is buffed by Fortified. But seems like our Prot 4 is not having any problems at all. I see it's not even dropping low here, so well done by Side to be able to survive this Queen here. And one more thing to note is that this dungeon is probably one of the most lenient dungeons that we've seen so far when it comes to strategy, just because there's not many ways you can go through this dungeon. This Gauntlet, you have to kill all the trash here. There's no way of skipping it. First room, same thing, right? You have to clear the whole room for the boss to spawn. There's not really many ways you can go about this dungeon, and that's why we've seen, almost all of the groups do the same strategy in the spring season. But now with the changes in the summer season and the new 4th affix, we've actually seen quite a bit of different strategies later in the bridge area, which we'll see how Black Mamba and Full Speed are doing, because that's going to be a very crucial part of this dungeon.
And straight into the thick of it here, Full Speed grabbing what looks like the entire room. Probably not the oh no, they're grabbing construct too. Okay, so they're pulling almost everything in the room, leaving one construct up on the side. They just want to deal with the double Entomb cast happening at the same time as the Emissary of Tides combined with the Flues. Now, of course, Emissary of Tides being wrapped up on top of all these mobs really doesn't provide any extra danger, minus the tank damage coming in from the melees, just because there's no important cast to be able to interrupt from these mobs. So everything is cleaved down together in a huge DPS gain from the 2 rogues, of course, almost topping 400k for Nyaners there, as Jeswhite has popped that Tree of Life, pumping as many regrowths as they can, mana free, of course, into the rest of those targets. Big heroic leap across the platform here in order to grab the 2nd construct. Maybe slight inefficiency here. I mean, it does take a while just to single target DPS down this construct, and they kind of melted through that pack so quickly. You'd think that maybe in the future they could probably actually combine the entire room with how just devastating their damage was on everything. But Full Speed here, nice pull for the rest of the room. Taking a moment to relax here. Oh, okay, so I spoke too soon. They do pull Machimba on top of this construct here and cleave it down together. We've seen this strat kind of formulate a bit in the West as well. Nagura, we saw some of these teams combine actually double construct with Machimba, so Machimba trucks tanks very hard, but shouldn't be too much of a concern for this Prot Warrior.
Yeah, it seems like Full Speed is doing a pretty good job so far. Now, Machimba, again, it's probably one of the easier bosses outside of tank damage in this whole dungeon here, especially in a fortified setting. So pulling the construct on top, definitely very efficient, and I like the strategy here because it also increases their boss damage if they play it properly. We see them, one of the mechanics here is, of course, entombing one of the players randomly in one of those 4 sarcophagi on the side of the room. We saw them get it out immediately here by the rest to do it just. Now Black Mamba still dealing with this area here, dealing with the Emissary, dealing with the constructs, so they're pretty far behind, on top of having those 8 deaths, right, which is a 40 seconds difference.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly have their work cut out for them, so, as we mentioned, whatever skip they do is going to be culminating in the bridge after Machimba here, leading up to the third council boss. So hopefully it pays off for them, but I don't know if it's going to pay off in the form of an extra 40 seconds that they wasted with the sloppiness of that first pull. And akin to what you said, Nagura, they two of those constructs still died from full speed in a rather efficient manner. Man going down here, first death of the dungeon for them. Immediate battle res comes up just to make sure they can as quickly chew through the rest of Machimba's 40% remaining HP as they can. They do have one more battle res available and might need to make good use of it coming up in the very dangerous hallway full of berserkers and spectral bolts from those hex priests.
Yeah, so what actually happened here to the Windwalker is that he had the Drain Fluid on him, which is this channeled drain ability that the boss casts on a random player. Now it does do ticking damage while he's draining, and once the ability is actually over, he will leave behind some sort of grievous effect on him that slows unless the person is getting healed and above. Now we actually see a mummy spawn here, which might actually cause them to wipe if they don't deal with it properly.
Yeah, certainly don't want to deal with that mummy, and if they spawn a second ad, there will be a daddy as well. I couldn't even say that one with a straight face. Anders here progging that cheat death. The mummy doesn't really provide too much increased melee damage on the tank, but the very dangerous thing is the cast. Exactly, that's what I wanted to mention. That cast, you can see just how ravaging that dot is, ticking for about 40% on the group. Anders didn't have the cheat death available and succumbs to the damage output of the mummy. Finally, they managed to down it at the loss of just a huge amount of damage needed to be poured into that mob. Tettles and Zyra here at the desk, and they're scratching their noodles as well as to why that mob even spawned. We've seen that spawn one other time ever in the previous season, and I believe they actually spawned it on purpose for a DPS efficiency gain, because as long as you interrupt it, like I said, it's not too big of a deal, but I mean, that one just didn't work out so well for full speed, Nagura.
Definitely not. Now, they are out of battle rests here, as they did rest the rogue at the very last second here, which it's a questionable decision as well, because the boss was so low already. They could have saved it probably, but because they already had so much trouble on the boss fight, spawning that mummy and just getting the cast through, they might have just figured, you know what, let's just be safe and use the battle rest as they're fighting the next trash here. And now this is going to be the crucial part of the whole dungeon, because on a fortified setting, these trash groups are just so dangerous to deal with. You have the Hex Priests, which constantly cast those spectral bolts, doing so much tank damage, on top of having the Berserker just constantly putting bleeds that stack on the tank. And you can see the Proud Warrior having 2 stacks, just doing so much damage to him. As you can see, most of the time we see rogues or other damage dealers just trying to take the bleed off of the warrior, because it is the closest proximity target to the Berserker that gets the bleed effect applied to them. So if your tank already has 1 stack or even 2, then you want to make sure that someone else is taking it off from him so it doesn't stack up too high.
Double mass stealth coming in here from full speed. The other thing with the tank is we pretty typically see tanks in this dungeon running Dwarf, but we actually have Night Elf here on the side of full speed for size, so just a lot of damage and danger coming in for them. The only 2 dwarves that we have in the dungeon for full speed are, of course, the rogues that will hopefully be the recipients of the Sever Axe debuff cast here from Kula the Butcher, which does an immense amount of damage, but you can stone form it off, and of course you can also drop the dot should you be the unlucky target before she falls, because if you drop combat between boss spawns here for this council boss, you will drop the I was going to say the aggro as well, but also of course the bleed from the Sever Axe. Black Mamba here, they've been tossed a bit of a bone. They have 9 deaths on the board now, so they accrued another one while we were kind of focusing on the oopsies and uh-ohs of Machimba there for full speed, but they've had a bit of an opening at least opened up for them, Nagura.
Yeah, definitely. As there's still so much trash left to do for both of those teams, really, and so many things can happen with this trash. We've seen the Western team struggle so much, and one more thing that we didn't mention before is the mini-boss that we still have to deal with. On a fortified setting, it does so much damage to your tank. We've seen tanks die in the Western region last weekend as well. So I assume the teams are saving their bloodlust for this mini-boss, just because it is so dangerous to deal with. But on top of that, still 30% trash, so the mini-boss is not going to be enough at all. They still have to deal with some of the bridge trash.
Nice view here from our observers from...
I liked.
There's the bloodlust. Nice view here from our observers from Smile Back, one of the rogues from full speed, so hopefully we can get some smiley boys in Twitch chat here right now. Zenazal here, 70%, the second boss of this 3-boss council for full speed. They're looking to make sure that they beat the second totem phase on the boss. They don't have any offensive dispels. Sometimes when you get the final totem wave when the boss is low, somebody can actually spam purge or dispel the boss so he doesn't doesn't get those absorbed. Smileback unfortunately getting one of the axes to the face there while he tries to get over and eating it yet again, just making sure to kill those totems off before the boss spawns. But even with Bloodlust, I mean, they've had that took a really long time for the totem. So they committed Bloodlust to that. Xanazal was at 53% before it wore off. So they're going to have to do over half the boss's damage without cooldowns or Bloodlust to try and kill it off before the next totem phase. It's going to be pretty close for them, as Kula the Butcher is now at 25% for Black Mamba, who are not far behind, save the 7 deaths, though.
Yeah, I really have to question if this Bloodlust is even going to be worth it for full speed. Just using it here on this fortified boss, even if you do say one totem phase, if you get the totems at the very end of the boss, you can just kill the explosive, ignore the other ones, because they're not going to do much to you anyway if you have a full melee lineup. So really questionable Bloodlust usage here, because they definitely are not going to get another Bloodlust out of this dungeon here, because the trash that they have left on a fortified setting, I doubt it's still going to take 10 more minutes. Well, Black Mamba still holding on to their Bloodlust, so we'll see what they do with that one. 35 seconds is quite a bit that they have to come up with, but you know, again, bridge trash can cause a lot of trouble for full speed. The mini boss can wipe them, especially if they don't have their Bloodlust available, and they don't have a battle rest either. So if anything goes wrong, they do not have the battle rest available to get them up. So there's lots of things that can still happen. And again, Black Mamba, in theory, were the favorites and the higher seeded team to go into this match. So Black Mamba still, you know, can come back and win this.
I mean, they certainly can, and hopefully using that last battle res on Machimba at the end of their encounter is not going to come back and bite them in the butt, because that was, I agree with you. I mean, the boss was certainly low enough, but I think they were caught up in the devastation of what was happening and kind of the worry that everything was kind of spiraling out of control at the end, that they wanted to just secure that. We can see Black Mamba, of course, has indeed held on to the entirety of their Bloodlust for Xanazal phase, who is just about to end here, and they will be get started on Aka Ali, the third boss of the encounter, which full speed just killed. They deal with the double Berserker pull here on the side, something that most teams actually completely ignore. They usually double stealth by it using the Shrouds, but of course those are on cooldown. No, they're actually back up right now. Well, one of them's available from Nianner's on full speed, but they have to deal with them here as they make sure that side gets enough distance and crowd control on the final Berserker to not refresh that 10-second bleed debuff, which Berserkers naturally try to refresh, with 2 seconds left on the buff. So a nice control of stuns and bumps will help prevent the tank from getting that dreaded 2-stack or even higher.
I have to say, this seems like a very inefficient pull, because, I mean, there's so much other trash that you can deal with on this bridge area. Maybe they're just very scared about this trash. Maybe they're just very worried that they're going to have some sort of wipes coming in and they just want to take it a little bit slower with those 2 Berserker pulls. But now they actually do have a bigger pull, as they pull the Tides Emissary with the rest of this mobs, where there's lots of casters in here. We see the Priest and we see the Healing Totem as well. Now with the Tides not being able to interrupt anything, definitely dangerous.
Definitely dangerous. Tree of Life does come out, and we still have the 2 bleed stack right now on side as Rigos gets pumped into him and just finally managed to get off. Unfortunately, was the recipient of a Frost Shock from the Witch Doctor as well, but no death, as the rally did help bolster the team's HP up there. Another bleed comes in on Sai right now that looks to try and finish off the rest of this. And you need to get a crowd control on the Berserker so he doesn't get another 2-stack. Blooded Leap coming in as he gets away from the mob and finally drops once again another stack of the bleed. But yeah, I mean, a lot of love was put into this pack in terms of cooldowns from the team. As you can see, Avatar's frequently gone for Warriors, but Last Stand used, Shield Wall used, Tree of Life used, Barkskin still available for Just Why. So I guess that was their big moment, perhaps, one of the tougher bridge pulls here. But we've seen similar teams do that in the West as well. They're only now at 82% trash. Black Mamba's at 83% trash. So we're going to see, this is at least where we start to see, Nagura, that Black Mamba, I guess some of the percentage trash at the beginning of the dungeon goes in their favor, but at what cost yet again?
Yeah, I mean, Full Speed is doing a good job dealing with these trash packs, but they go pretty slow here, right? Maybe they even get another Bloodlust up. I was saying there's no way they're gonna get another one, but because they're taking it so slow, just pulling those 2 Berserkers, pulling each pack one by one, not really making use of, you know, the Shadow Melt efficiency which is something we've seen on this bridge area a lot from the western region in the spring season, where you would just see some of the Witch Doctors, you see the Berserkers, pull the rest together, AoE it down, and then just Shadow Melt off the aggro. So you can just see the dangerous mobs, kill the rest of it, and then just Shadow Melt away and be sure you have enough percentage. So that's not something we see here. As Black Mamba actually has a death coming in here. I wonder if the Windwalkers go down, but they do have 2 battle rests available to them.
Oh no, I feel so bad because while you were talking, I watched the entirety of the Latent Arcana channel, that DPS trinket for the huge buff. The poor Windwalker monk spent all his time channeling it. He was ready to get in there with all his cooldowns, and the moment he steps in, he just got insta-killed. So unfortunate timing, a lot of damage loss as a result there for Black Mamba, who with this pack should be hitting that beautiful 96%, which is the amount of percent trash they need before going on to the Shadow of Zul, which you can see ominously waits in the background top left there from our observers on full speed, which I've now panned the camera away from. Full speed, getting the corner here, they do need to deal with this pack in order to get their 96%. So this is where the difference is. We have the two constructs at the beginning of the dungeon, which cost 8 deaths for Black Mamba, versus full speeds here, pull of 2 Raptors and a Beastmaster. Not really sure, perhaps equivalent, not worth it perhaps in the end. Healing Totem here in the middle of the bridge as the Berserker gets another tick or two off, but they are already getting over to Shadow of Zul, but they're once again 40 seconds behind, 8 death difference. Here's their Bloodlust.
Yeah, one more thing about full speed is that their healer just had to use their Innervate on this pack here. So he's not going to have to Innervate for the Shadow of Zul. Now all eyes on Black Mamba as they're actually engaged Shadow of Zul with their Bloodlust available. So Black Mamba actually caught up in a dungeon compared to full speed. Still 40 seconds difference, of course, but they have their Bloodlust for Shadow of Zul, so they're going to be done with it faster. And just look at soon you can look at the HPS of the healer, just how much HPS you have to put into this tank just so he can survive. You can see just constantly spamming HOTS and spamming regrowths onto the tank as he just drops so low.
Yeah, I'd like to look at the HPS of the healer. I'll just have to look below the tank's HPS first, as the Prot Warrior is, of course, out healing the Precious Resto Druid here through a series of absorbs and, of course, the 2 defensive trinkets in the form of Edict, which I'm not actually sure if he swapped over to the Magic, and if he didn't, that is a huge misplay. That Urchin plus the IP Absorb and whatever else he might be using in terms of Azerite traits. Full speed here. Tree of Life has been popped for just. Also, I'm not sure if you noticed, Black Mamba, they popped their Bloodlust while they were still about 5 seconds away from Shadow of Zul. So they were still running over to Zul, pop their Bloodlust, and they were just running over with the Bloodlust counter going down. Maybe one of them was there only, so a bit premature pop there from the Bloodlust. Full speed, managing to handle this pull quite well as Black Mamba has already gone downstairs, and they cannot waste this time to eat. They got to get going right away. So they do pull the boss, King Desire here finally. They have to beat this boss by at least 40 seconds over their counterpart team right now. Side just go, so much damage coming in, and Prot Warrior not the best equipped to deal with incoming magic damage, sustained magic damage rather, versus some of the other tank options that do exist. Battle Res does come up, full speed does recover, and they head downstairs, but again, no Battle Res available for the last boss. Another death on the board. Everything's starting to favor Black Mamba just a bit here.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I have to question their Bloodlust usage for full speed, because again, they might get their Bloodlust here, but 2 minutes 45 bucks, I mean, they're probably gonna get it at the very end, but at what cost, right? Because they didn't have the Bloodlust for this mini boss, and just running this Tree of Life, which actually is a very good talent to have for Shadow of Zul, just because you have this big tree form, you have those instant regrowths that you can pump into the tank, but it seemed like they were not managing their cooldowns properly, because at the very end, on the last 5 to 10% of Shadow of Zul, they were completely out of cooldowns. The tree form ran out, no Iron Bark, no Shield Wall, no Last Stand. They just completely ran out of cooldowns. So definitely some mismanaging of cooldowns going on there. If they had the Bloodlust, the mini boss would have died before this happened, but I just think they could have done it without the death happening if they managed their cooldowns more better.
I would definitely agree with that. Envies has, of course, no access to the Shard staff there. It has proc. Just does have access to the staff now. I don't think he's procced at all dungeon, or am I incorrect about that? I can't remember if he was the one that procced it early in the dungeon. Nonetheless, one of the Restorators does have access to the proc from the Shard staff. Not sure at how many charges, as Raban does get down tier. King Desire has entered phase 3 of the encounter, 60% as he mounts Zala coming up right now. Of course, all damage redirected to that mount until that is done with pulsing AoE Fear constantly as the warrior easily just Berserker rages through that. We have a Cloak of Shadows pre-popped as well from Nyaners to make sure he can get as much damage in as possible. King Desire here, 30% though for Black Mamba. I'm not sure that's going to be enough to overcome 35 seconds though, Nagura, because they are getting access to the Bloodlust in 12 seconds here.
Yeah, I don't know. This is going to be really close, to be honest. I mean, 35 seconds, as you said, is quite a bit, but they're 17%, and look at the damage, right? Look at the Resto Druid pumping so much damage. Also, the Warrior just doing a lot of single target damage compared to a full speed. The Resto Druid on full speed side doing 10k less CPS. This is damage is everything that matters at this point, and you want your damage dealers to avoid as many tornadoes as possible. Now, of course, the graphic is incorrect, so both of those teams do have 100% trash. So at this point, it's going to be the 35 seconds that matter that Full Speed has to finish off this boss.
35 seconds and ticking quickly here as we hit 25 seconds left for Full Speed. Halfway through their Bloodlust right now. King Desire at 30% HP. 19 seconds remaining on the board as we watch it tick down ominously, but I just don't think they're going to have the gas to finish this off with 10 seconds remaining. No way they're doing 2% a second to the boss. And Full Speed, I can't believe it. I mean, they just threw the dungeon through it, perhaps with not the most efficient routing either. Another death on the board with Man at the very end. And somehow, some way, Black Mamba squeezes a win in the first game, Jack.
I mean, they knew they had 95% of Twitch chat on their side, so how could they lose there, Sloot?
By wiping 8 times on the first pull of the dungeon.
Well, they certainly tried, but they did come through, and routing has just been such a major factor as you guys have been talking about this one. Zyronic, take it away. It's been a trip.
I mean, the difference in routing here for Black Mamba is actually super impressive, and it's part of the reason they were able to come back in this dungeon and actually win it. I didn't think they were going to win it, but a couple extra mistakes from Full Send at the end, their Full Speed rather, kind of gave them the dungeon at the end. That being said, this initial pull is definitely very interesting from them. It lets them kind of change up what they pull later on in the dungeon. We'll take a little bit of a look at that later. But in terms of routing, Full Speed just did the typical route, but they just did it a little less clean in general, and that's what ended up costing them the dungeon.
And it was one of those things where we've seen so many times, different runs, different races really, where you wipe early on, you make mistakes early on, and people just kind of call it. But then after seeing how different these teams have done it and what all can really happen in a King's Rest, if you're just pulling so efficiently, mistiming some of your cooldowns, it makes all the difference.
I mean, King's Rest plus East Cup just never ceases to disappoint, as I said earlier.
That's right.
One more thing to note too is that comes with experience as well, that I talked about before this match. If you're a completely new team, you're going to have a harder time knowing what to do if something goes wrong at the very start of the dungeon. Because during practice, you can reset your key. You know, if something goes wrong, you just go, you know what, let's try this again, guys. Let's go back, reset the key, let's try it again. But in the cup, you can't do that. So the more experience you have with these kind of situations, the better you're going to deal with it. And Black Mamba definitely showing that they come in with the experience from the spring season.
Without a question. And of course, routing has been so important. So using Mythic Dungeon tools, let's take a look at those routing changes.
Yeah, so looking at the screen here, I have the typical routing that we see from most teams, and the things to look at which they changed is they actually cut this entire pack out of the routing completely. They don't pull this at all. And what makes that important is they don't pull this brute here, which is a huge area of denial. It takes forever to kill, has a lot of HP. So what they do instead is they end up pulling these 2 animated guardians with the Void Emissary and all the minions of Zul as well to give them a perfect 100% count. And what enables them to do this pull, or I mean, even though they messed the poll up, it's important to highlight what they were planning on doing. These 4 animated guardians, they were changed last patch to only target the tank with their frontal slams. So if your tank does have them all stacked up properly, you can actually point them in a certain direction and pretty easily AoE them down. Now, unfortunately, they had some problems with the Void Touched Emissary, but I feel like we too often highlight what goes right for some of these teams, even though, it did go poorly for them here. The superior routing and not having to deal with this particular mob right here is what ended up winning them this dungeon.
And being able to make sure they don't have to deal with some of those mobs, and thankfully we're not on teaming where we get 2 more of them added on top of it. It goes to show, as Nigura mentioned, that experience for these teams, the knowledge of what they need to be able to get through, even if it does entail very, very big risks early on. So that'll be bringing us into that game 2, so don't go anywhere, guys. The next round is coming up on the other side of this break. Welcome back to the Dungeon International as we're getting ready for Game 2 between Black Mamba and Full Speed, as we're getting ourselves ready to go here in Tol de Gore.
Good old Tol de Gore. We are in an explosive, grievous affix here, and of course, Void weighted in terms of beguiling for this season's affix, so we'll have to see what these teams can pull. Nigura, we've seen absolute disaster happen from explosive in Justice Howless's room before, honestly in both regions.
That's probably why they're running a DK now, because they have the AMS, of course, to survive some of those explosives. As we see Black Mamba pop their Bloodlust, pull some of those crabs on top of the Sand Queen here. We've seen this a very similar pull before. Usually, you want to save the Bloodlust a little bit just because of the upheaval damage, but what?
The DK damage, sorry.
Oh, that's a lot of damage.
That's you're right, Nigura. That is an officially
more than 5.
a lot.
But yeah, the Bloodlust, of course, we've seen this before, right? We've seen the DKs do so much damage when they pop all of their cooldowns. This huge AoE damage coming in. Now, how much it matters, because this is AoE damage, right? This is definitely not single target damage, and we actually see 2 people go down. They're only gonna be able to get 1 member back up. They're gonna be able to finish this boss very likely while having 1 more member up. They should probably get up their Windwalker, because the DK used all of the cooldowns now, so he's not gonna do a lot of single target damage anymore. But they didn't listen to me. They actually got the DK up. I feel like it would have been better to use another Windwalker.
Probably for the best that I didn't listen to you. No, it is important to note, I actually thought there was something wrong with my eyesight because I only saw 1 yellow frame amongst their 5. There was only 1 rogue on Black Mamba, but guess who's the 1 DPS that stayed alive when everything went downhill there? It was the rogue because of cheat death. So Moon managing to stay alive and help finish off the Sand Queen here that's doing just trying to finish the rest of this team off full speed. Has committed their Bloodlust as well, finally, with certainly a much more modest pull compared to the one that we just saw Black Mamba do. They're at higher trash percentage as well, and the Sand Queen is at 85%. So they are certainly a bit behind just because of the AoE prowess of that unholy DK. But it's going to be completely evened out here with the 2 deaths, plus needing to 4-man the remaining 60% of the boss when the disaster happened.
Okay, so even if I'm all for like them changing up their comps a little bit, not having 3 rogues in their composition, but I wonder if this is really the dungeon for them to switch up their rogue comp, just because explosive is one thing rogues are really good at, right? And that's probably what they wiped to. They had the explosives go through. Rogues are just so good at targeting them, killing them, while not losing a lot of AoE damage at all or other target damage. And then on top of that, you need to open those cages, which rogues are the only ones who can really do it unless you have the profession for it. And, Vanish and Shadow Meld is going to help them out. And then you also have the cannons, which the rogues are really good at because they have the cloak to avoid the explosive damage in case it goes through.
Well, hang on a second, Igor. Are you telling me that the rogue class is the best at explosives, the best at opening cages and getting buffs, the best at having 2 true CCs in this dungeon in order to skip selected trash that they want, vanishing and having a cheat death? I would never have guessed it. Full Speed certainly didn't guess it either as they run the 3 rogue comp. But again, we come back, jokes aside, too. It's something that they've probably practiced on both teams. It's not like Black Mamba brought the Unholy DK by accident. We saw just how much damage it output at the start, and if they managed to make good use of it, something Zyra would always say in the last season, you gotta play around the Unholy DK and make good use of it. So if they manage to pull that off with consistent large pulls where they don't lose 2 members along the way, they can get out a fair bit of damage over their opponents here. Pretty substantial pull coming in here from Black Mamba. I'm going to assume that they're going to Shadow Meld most of this, if not all of it, because that's a lot. And there it is, indeed the Shadow Meld, as we see just Hallis in the cage behind eating some strawberry jam on the ground. Envy's unfortunately going down, and it looks like the skip.
No battle res.
The skip is going down. They do have a battle res. No, actually they don't. Oh. They do in the form of the DK, but they don't have one available because of the disaster at the start. So down goes everybody. So Black Mamba's very hopeful pull didn't work out so well for them there. They'll have to restart over. The only advantage they got out of that was the Enchanted Emissary was up long enough that it despawned because of the 20-second timer in terms of their energy loss. But how are they going to do this? I mean, they have Shadow Meld. Yeah, Shadow Melds are down. Unholy DK goes down. Looks like they're going to have to do some of this trash as Full Speed is just going up at the start of the dungeon. They're dealing with the floor just below Jess Hallis right now where the buffs are located, getting ready to open that door, and they run up right away as well.
This is a huge disaster for Black Mamba because, as you mentioned, they don't have a Shadow Meld available to them. Full Speed also struggling with this skip here, as everyone's just dropping low from the Grievous, as you mentioned. But he's not going to be able to keep himself alive here either. And they did the same thing. So they also had the Shadow Meld go off on the rest to do it, but he didn't de-aggro, and therefore they're not going to be able to get the rest off. Now, Full Speed does have a battle rest ready, but they can't use it for skipping because the Resolute is the only one who has the battle rest. Now, Black Mamba, on the other hand, they could have done the same skip without the Shadow Meld because they could have used the DK to rest up the Resolute, and then he could have mass rest everyone, but they used it in the first boss, and therefore they didn't have it available.
Yeah, I mean, good thing we have our Cerberus here because it's an absolute fiesta between the 2 teams. Just a lot of sloppiness coming in with both of them. We saw Black Mamba, of course, get caught with the poor skip. Their Shadow Meld didn't go off. Full Speed got caught with 4 stacks of Grievous on the 2 of the 3 rogues, excuse me. And we also saw one of the debuffs from the mobs go on the Resolute as well, along with the Grievous, and that just finished off the pack. Now they have to deal with this Void-touched Emissary because, once again, same issue on both sides. As you mentioned, Igor, there is no access to the Shadow Meld. So once again, bit of a freebie tossed over by Black Mamba, which seemingly had the worst disaster come in early in the dungeon, but full speed matched their just wavelength essentially. Black Mamba finally does get upstairs. Shadow Meld has come up for them, and it looks like they've managed to pull the rest of it, skip the rest of it, excuse me, successfully.
Yeah, so one thing to note about Black Mamba, that Moon, their rogue, was actually talking to Aya, one of our observers, and he was saying that they're very nervous, or he specifically is very nervous about this whole cup before this match started. So maybe this is the reason why Black Mamba is struggling so much, not only in King's Rest, but also here in Tollagor. And I mean, they were very lucky to win the first game after having all of these deaths. And now the same thing seems to be happening again to Black Mamba. They have those 9 deaths, they messed up their skip, but Full Speed just following suit and messing up the same thing. And therefore Black Mamba still has a very high chance of winning this, which is very lucky for them, as you know, they're making so many mistakes here because maybe nerfs.
They are, but some of the hardest parts of the dungeon are coming up here, especially with explosive. We've seen just how rough Jess House's floor can be with explosives for various teams in both regions, quite frankly. We've seen that be a big issue for them. A lot of explosives coming in, but the team does well to line of sight here for the Void-touched emissary that awaits them on the final stretch before Jess House cleaving down easily, of course, with that Blade Flurry, and everybody's kind of contributing, but likely the Rogue is helping cleave down those explosive orbs as much as possible. Unfortunately, they miss one of the watery dome kicks on the Sea Speakers, which provides a pretty substantial damage absorb. They are running a line, so no access to Dispels or Arcane Torrent. Well, no Dispels from the classes, but no Arcane Torrents from Blood Elves available at all, so they really have to watch out with those. Another Watery Dome goes off, but fortunately interrupted last second. Huge amount of explosives coming up. Team does well to cap that off, but Wong taking a huge amount of damage here as he has one of the stacks going in, and they were just having Salt Blast go into his face constantly from the Sea Speakers, which do a huge amount of damage. Full Speed finally doing the skip as well, quite sloppily, might I add. Another 2 deaths on the board for them. This is really unstable on both sides here, Nagura. I'm kind of worried about Wong right now. He just cannot stabilize.
Yeah, and they don't have a rest available, and everyone has Grievous stacks. Look at the Grievous. Everyone has 4 stacks. It ramped up so fast, and once you have those 4 stacks, it's so hard to heal that away, especially if you don't have any sort of cooldowns available, any healing cooldowns. But the rest of it on Black Mamba side actually doing a good job to recover here. And as you mentioned as well, there's so many casts going through. As a Sea Speaker here has a shield on them, so the Watery Dome going through, not being interrupted. And since they're all playing Alliance, they do not have this mass AoE dispel, the Blood Elf racial available to them. So once the Watery Dome goes through, this huge shield just is going to stay there, and you have to wait until it's gone by itself when it runs out of time. As they finally managed to down this trash pool here. They still have this Void Emissary to deal with, unless they choose to Shadow Melt it, or Shadow Melt off the aggro of it. But it seems like they're ignoring it as they engage the boss here, Jess Howless, with one of those Arsonists.
They have to be really careful because that Void Emissary is still in the background casting Queen's Decree. We can see it, meaning anything down this hall has line of sight access to the mob and will get hit for a substantial amount of damage. So not only hiding for flashing daggers here, but when Jess Howlers does his transition at 70%, he will run down the hall. The players need to chase him, so they'll have to time it properly between casts from that Void Emissary. Last thing you need is a spot death coming out of that. And then on the other side of the hall, of course, they will need to deal with the explosives. Quite a lot of explosives just because of the jailers that they break out, and Bobby as well, the brother of Jess. Full speed here, 30% trash on the board. They're looking to try and finish off whatever they can on this floor before engaging Jess House as well. They still have the entire dangerous stretch of hall with that Void Emissary to do. So once again, Full Speed definitely a bit behind on Black Mamba despite the slight advantage in trash percentage.
Yeah, and one more thing to note here is that... Okay, I just lost my train of thought completely. So let's talk about this boss as they are in the next phase. Completely forgot what I was trying to say. There are Jess Howless now. Bobby is here as well, which means that there's going to be more casts that need to interrupt, meaning that if you miss one of the interrupts, or Bobby runs away and casts somewhere in the corner without you line of sighting, then it can cause a huge problem here, because if everyone gets feared, on top of having your flashing daggers go off or having an explosive go off, because you also have the Arsonist here, which constantly spawns explosive, then you're in trouble. But since it is a full melee lineup, they do have very short cooldown on their interrupt timers, so they should be able to get all of those interrupts off, hopefully.
Yeah, we do see, of course, the interrupt timers at the top of the screen. Mind Freeze kick, and of course, spearhand strike from the Manga. Not to mention the Warrior, of course, has Pummel. So a lot of access to 15-second interrupt cooldowns on the side of Black Mamba. Should be no problem for them as Jess Hallis reaches 5% right now. They've done a masterful job, quite frankly, of dealing with the explosive orbs. No problem for them there as the last of them are about to go off. There's just one peeking out there on the edge. Man, I just said that and then they let one go off. The entire team takes an explosive orb to the face. Calculated, I'm sure, as they knew they were all max health and wouldn't cause much issue. Envy's just a bit of struggle here to make sure that Like and Wong are healed above their 90% threshold for that Grievous stack to finally take off. And Wong, please do it. There we go. Finally gets healed above 90% as they get ready to go upstairs. Like, unfortunately, still sitting at the 4 stack right now as Envy's had a vision proc from the Major right now. Black Mamba running up as quickly as they can in order to get access to the cannons. Now, we do know this dungeon, Nagura, but just important to note for those at home, since it is new as of this season, the cannons have been nerfed. They have 100 energy. Each shot is 20 energy. That means you only get 5 shots per cannon, according to my math, which is always right. So we're going to have to see how well they play with it. We've seen some stellar play from cannons coming in from Method of You, if I'm not mistaken, using both cannons to kind of trail all of the mobs from the floor here. So we'll see what the teams do.
This is going to be a very difficult setup time, though, just because of the nerf on the cannons and the 5 shots. You can't just jump into the cannon and randomly shoot around. You need to make sure that everything is 100% set up properly. All of them are gathered, so each shot hits all of the mobs. So you want to deal with the emissaries first, as we can see Black Mamba do here as they target the Void Emissary, and then you want to make sure that everything else is gathered completely. Now, one more thing that makes this a lot more difficult is this explosive affix, because explosive does hit you even if you are in the cannon. So the rogues, which I assume are going to go into the cannon, need to make sure that they deal with it properly. So if there's a lot of them go off, then you need to go out of the cannon, use your Cloak of Shadows, and go back in, or have just line of sight and then come back. But you definitely cannot get hit by lots of explosives at the same time.
And Disaster coming up here for full speed as we set just how dangerous Jess Hallis' floor is with explosives, and we see it firsthand as the entire team wipes. I think one of the rogue, not JK, the rogue goes down as well. Full team wipe here, disastrous. Jess Hallis at 36% health, full reset on the boss, whatever CDs, and I believe Bloodlust by the looks of it has 9 minutes cooldown left, was committed here, so full speed just going completely haywire here and having a lot of issue with this boss. They're going to need to run all the way back upstairs and pull this yet again as Black Mamba does their first massive pull here and gets ready for the cannon play.
So I finally remember what I was trying to say earlier.
Oh, good. It's the year 2020 now.
So what I was trying to say is that none of the rogues actually, as far as I'm aware, opened the cages in the second floor of the room. Those cages, if you open them, you actually get 1 out of 4 buffs that can buff your group with attack power is one of them. So very interesting to see that neither of the rogues or of the teams were trying to get this buff at all. It seems like they don't think it's worth it at all for the rest of the dungeon to use the time to open them, which, I don't know, maybe they just don't want to deal with the RNG, because it can be that the easier access buffs are spell power, which of course doesn't really do much for you. So maybe they just choose to not run with it at all, so they don't have to deal with this RNG factor. As Black Mamba is reaching 50% trash here, and full speed unfortunately has to go back to Jess Hallis. A full team wipe in the second stage of Jess, especially after using Bloodlust, is just so devastating for them. It's all going to be about Black Mamba now.
Massive time loss here for full speed as they once again get ready to go around the corner with that Void Touched Emissary, skipping it just like we saw Black Mamba do earlier, and full speed do earlier as well, and successfully. Moon, unfortunately, proccing Cheat Death here on the danger that is explosives, cannons, plus the combination with this balcony right now. Wong doing another pull. Moon just not getting healed through the Grievous stack right now, only gets around the corner at the last second, line of sight of Envy's, and does not manage to get healed. So Cheat Death proc plus Rogue Death on top of it equals a horrible time to need to use the battle res right as the rest of the teams come in. A lot of explosives going in as Ring of Peace keeps the huge amount of trash at bay, bottlenecked in the entrance, making nice work of the cannon right now, but explosives going off, showing just how horrible they are on this map with the combo of the cannon line of sight plus explosive. Light goes down, no battle res available because they just used it on Moon. Full Moon on the team right now. Rogue goes down, and the rest of the trash breaks out freely from the jail and chases Wong, Envy's, and their Unholy DK to the opposite corner.
You saw Moon just jumping out of the cannon, trying to go line of sight to not get hit by the explosive, but he was just slightly too slow and didn't manage to get out line of sight and just goes down there. They're out of battle rests at this point, so the only way to get off a rest on Moon here is to somehow get out of combat with Shadow Meld maybe and cast a mass rest. But at this point I feel like Moon should just release and just get back here. He does have Shadow Meld available to him, and he can of course stealth as well, so there should be a way for Moon to get back here without them having to use a battle rest, without them having to use a mass rest.
Yeah, but he wants to make Envy's work for it right now, so he's going to have to wait for the res. Well, let's think about it. Was there anything with True Sight on the way here?
Even then he has Shadow Meld, right?
Yeah, he does have Shadow Meld. You're absolutely right. This was a pretty lazy play. I mean, wasting a lot of time. Look at them right now just waiting for him to cast Revitalize and get res. Full speed. Full speed here, dealing with Jess Hallis once again. Finally getting past that 36% mark. Bobby gets interrupted in the distance from one of the rogues as he runs over, and they look to try and finish Jess off. 25% on the board for them. Black Mamba at 73%, so they're going to have to deal with pretty much all of the trash that remains in the dungeon from here up until Korgus.
Yeah, I think Tolagor is a dungeon where we're going to see many more different strategies from here on out in the rest of the summer season, just because I feel like none of those teams really have figured out the perfect way to do this dungeon. We've seen lots of different things happen in the western region last weekend, and now we see different strategies here in the eastern region as well. Some teams want to do as much trash as possible still with the cannons, even after the nerf, but it's not guaranteed that it's even worth it. Even if you manage to kill a lot of trash with the 5 cannon shots that you have in each cannon, maybe it's not actually going to pay off just because the setup time is going to be so long. Because the way you have to deal with all of this, gather them up and make sure they're all at the very same spot to get hit by it. And then so many things can go wrong, as we've seen for Black Mamba right now, just having explosives go off, the tank being silenced by one of those abilities going down. So many things that can go wrong. Maybe it's not actually worth it to do all of this cannon part, go through this trouble. Maybe you just want to deal with more trash, maybe even with the crocodiles at the very start before the first boss, or more trash inside the house. We will see what kind of strategies the teams come up with in the future.
You know, Light kind of just ran away from the healer there with 2 stacks of Grievous, got down to 3. Unfortunately, no death for them, but this is, they have 84% trash. They need more trash before they kill Valyria and head over to the last 5 trash mobs worth of percentage after Valyria before Korgus, so they know they needed more. They had to head back into all. This is, I'm kind of confused here. I mean, they did all the trash on the balcony and then came back all the way into the room just to clean up the remaining percent they need. Not exactly the most efficient routing that we've seen. Moon goes down again. 13 desperate board. You're absolutely right, Nigger. There's a lot of strategies that can come out of Tol Dagor from the teams with the cannon changes, but I would recommend not one that includes 13 or more deaths from these 2 teams right now, because it's just not working out great. Moon finally does come back up. 3 stacks of Grievous, 2 and 3 stacks on the entire group here. 4 stacks right now on the Unholy DK, so a lot of damage coming in. Envy's does commit the Tranquility to the situation, making sure everyone's healthily healed up above 90% so that they can stabilize. I mean, this was only, what, a 3-mob pull, and it was almost disastrous for the team. They had to commit a death to it, Tranquility on top of it all, and finally are managing to clean it up before they head over to Knight Captain Valyria. Full speed, though, just so behind right now, trying to catch up. They haven't even started their cannon play yet.
I mean, if you look at the deaths, it almost seems like, oh, Black Mamba, they died 13 times. They must be very far behind. But then you look over at Full Speed, also died 13 times. They're actually completely even with deaths right now. It's just as if no one would have died at all. Now, Full Speed, 53%, right? So not only are they 13 deaths because of this whole skip that they messed up and the whole just Howless swipe, they also are 30% or even more than behind compared to Black Mamba. So at this point, it's all going to be about Black Mamba. And again, they're actually being very lucky for Black Mamba's side here, because Black Mamba, they're not playing up to their game, right? They see there's the higher seed, they're supposed to be doing well, they're the favorites to win here, and Twitch chat, right, giving them so much hope as well, and then they end up doing so badly here. Definitely nerves on their mind, just having so many problems, but they're almost gifted this win here, as Full Speed is just having even more problems than Black Mamba does.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's certainly a map that leaves a lot to be desired for these two teams. They'll need to step it up in the future cups for this dungeon. I mean, frankly, for both plays, King's Rest was kind of sloppy too. King's Rest is a pretty rough dungeon. Knight Captain Levere here at 57% for Black Mamba is doing a great job controlling the barrels right now. You can see a nice pile behind Wong, the warrior tank there, just making sure they pile them up so that they have access to the various corners of the room where they can pre-pull, as they're doing very well right now. Knight Captain Valeri, so that melee get max uptime access to the boss for DPS, as she does very frequently cast Cinder Flame. She sits there a couple of moments, she thinks about doing her next move, then she casts Fuse Lighter, so if the boss was left there, you wouldn't be able to pull her over as quickly, and melee would lose a lot of DPS. So well done here by them, as Knight Captain Valeri hits 20% full speed, is not even doing the cannons yet. They're actually working on a pretty sizable pull in the room before they get to the balcony where the cannons are. So it seems that, once again, just as you mentioned earlier, Nagura, a strategy less about cannon play just because they were nerfed coming out of full speed versus Black Mamba, who had 40% trash on the board before they started cannon play.
We see one downside here for not having a ranged damage dealer at all on Black Mamba's side is that you have an explosive spawn inside this explosion area, and because not even an outlaw row can reach it with increased range. So if you had some sort of ranged player here, they could actually deal with these explosives. Not a Moonkin though, because they don't do any damage to those, so you definitely don't want to bring that. As Black Mamba down the boss here, they're on their way to the last boss, Korgis. Now, lots of times we talked about Korgis and how difficult of a fight that is, but this time around we do have 45, so it's not buffed by Tyrannical anymore like it was in the spring season, but we have the Grievous affix, which definitely does make this boss still difficult, and therefore Black Mamba did save their Bloodlust all the way until this point.
2 stacks of the Shadow Decree debuff on the rest of the group. If they don't line of sight this, it's going to one-shot them, so they have to move out of the way before the third one goes off. They actually managed to kill it before the third one goes off, so that was really close, as the group does round up the remaining 5 mobs that they need to reach 100% trash. Full speed now at still 13 deaths, of course, but 68% trash. They're starting to deal with their cannon play now, but a lot of damage coming in, especially from that Void Emissary that they are dealing with on their essentially one floor below, but in the corner near the cannon, very much like Black Mamba right now. A lot of explosives going off in the middle there as the rest of the team line of sights them to make sure that they don't get clipped by that 50% max damage hit, and a few Grievous stacks as well. Nothing that I believe Envies at this point won't be able to handle before they get started on Korgis. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. If you don't pre-move the boss, which is what I was talking about with Valeri, you will end up in a situation where you don't have access. So having ranged DPS there would be lovely, but it's been a long time since I visited a museum, so I haven't seen a ranged DPS in ages.
Wow. You know what? I think Tolnagar will be one of the dungeons where ranged DPS wouldn't actually be as bad as people think they are, just because there's so many things, like the cannon part, for example, where once you deal with the cannons, anyone else can't touch those, because the cannon, of course, does do friendly fire damage to everyone. So ranged players can still attack them, while melees cannot. So there's a way for
I feel like there's a bit of a bias here coming from you.
A little bit. Anyway, Black Mamba on the last boss here, Korgis, they are popping their Bloodlust here as well. And again, on a 45 setting, this boss in theory should not be very dangerous, but because of the Grievous affix and the RNG involved, as we see a double come out right now. So double means that these explosive bursts that do an initial damage and leave behind the ticking dot damage over time effect, it can be bad RNG, and they get 2 in a row basically. And the way to look out for that is look at this Deadeye cast. If after the Deadeye cast you get an explosive burst, then that means you're going to get a double. If it's another cast, then you won't get a double. So this time around, they're going to be fun.
You're looking at the Deadeye cast. I'm looking at the dead members at full speed right now as a couple more deaths go up on the board, leading to 17, and just a huge disaster coming in from explosives combined with the cannon fire from them as well. 18 deaths now, almost another full team wipe for them, as a man finally, I don't know, he does manage to sneak out. I saw that cheat death proc, I thought he vanished it off, but just more sloppiness for them right now, as they will likely get relegated down to the lower bracket, with Black Mamba sitting at a mighty 20% on Overseer Corgi.
Yeah, they did get 2 doubles so far on Black Mamba's side, so they were a little bit unlucky when it comes to that. But the rest of it not having a problem at all, dealing with all the damage coming in on top of having this Grievous as well. This time around, they don't get a double, so they're going to be safe to finish off this boss here. Nothing really can go wrong anymore, as they win 2-0 against full speed. And let's be honest here, it was not very clean at all.
No, I mean, a lot can go wrong and has gone wrong with these two teams. Zyro looks like he has a lot to talk about over there. But 2-0 from Black Mamba in this series, Jack. I mean, 2-0 doesn't really tell the entire story of just how that series went down.
It really doesn't. Going first, of course, into King's Rest and then into Toldegor, I think a lot of our expectations were that Toldegor was going to be like, that's one of the shocking things is after watching a lot of Eastern Region, after watching a lot of King's Rest from them, I'm very surprised that in many cases the King's Rest was cleaner than the Toldegor, but both of them had so much sloppiness to it.
Yeah, and it would be really easy to sit here and nitpick all the things that went wrong for both teams, but at the end of the day, both teams made very massive mistakes in the first half of the dungeon. And what I kind of want to highlight is that Black Mamba, this didn't really phase them at all. They stuck to their strategy, and they did have a couple more mistakes after their first initial wipes, but they didn't stray from their strategy. They kept their strategy going, and they managed to finish the dungeon in a pretty decently respectable time considering all that went wrong. Whereas Full Speed kind of slowed down and took things easy, which it kind of threw me off.
You can't do when you're named Full Speed.
You can't do that in the MDI in general. And the thing to point out here in general, I think, for Black Mamba is all three of their DPS players are new. They swapped out their entire DPS comp for this season from the Spring LAN. So the fact that they kind of had the composure to stick to their guns and actually go on with their strategy after having so many mistakes, it's something to be looked at. You can admire that for sure.
And just having the majority of their team being brand new to the MDI as well is always going to be very significant and going to affect your team synergy, how you guys are playing, the experience, all of that. So with, of course, Black Mamba moving on, we are going to see Full Speed moving down into that lower bracket, and we will see if they go up against Team 430 a little bit later today.